Hello everybody and welcome back to another video on the channel. Today I'm going to be going through my tips for the two semi-finals of this week in the AFL. Obviously I'm not on Squiggle today. I am going to change it up a little bit, the formula of these tipping videos. This is something I actually did in round 1 and I ended up just stopping that and starting just using Squiggle for my tips, since that was easier and a lot less time consuming. But there's only 2 games to pick between, to pick the winners, so I thought it'd be a better viewing experience if I went back to how I originally did it. So yeah, I'll be doing this for the preliminary finals as well, and then I'll do a bit more of an in-detail review of the grand final. But yeah, without further ado, I say we get into my semi-final tips. I'm also going to be picking the leading goal scorer, who I think will be the leading goal scorer, and the player with the most disposals on the ground as well as a tip, just to shake things up a little bit. And yeah, let's get into it. So the first semi-final is obviously the matchup between the Brisbane Lions and Melbourne. It is being played at the MCG. Both times the sides have played each other throughout the year. It has been a one-sided contest, despite both teams for the most part being relatively close to each other on the ladder. So the first time these two sides played, it was actually a first v second matchup, with Brisbane being first and Melbourne second. But Melbourne just absolutely blew Brisbane away after about quarter time. They ended up winning by 64 points despite Brisbane leading at quarter time. Yeah, it was a demolition job. It was a one-sided affair. And the second time they played off at the Gabba, it was all over at half time. It was a 66-point margin in favour of Melbourne, 81-15. And it was a bit more close in the second half, but by that point it did not matter at all, as Melbourne had the game wrapped up well and truly, and it ended up being a 58-point margin. Some people are predicting this one to be a bit of a similar result, while others are predicting it to be quite a close result, with Melbourne still being a bit shaky in the second half of the year. But yeah, I'll get into my tip in just a second. But before that, I'll just like to point out a couple of interesting stats relating to this matchup. So Charlie Cameron for the Brisbane Lions has only been held goalless twice this season, and both times it was when he played against the Melbourne Demons. And obviously the other well-known stat with this match is that Brisbane have not won a game at the MCG since 2014. And they've only won 3 matches there since 2004. Not been a happy hunting ground for them at all. So moving on to my tips for this game, I am going to tip it to be a bit of a blowout. We haven't had a blowout in finals this season so far, and I think this really is the game that it could be the first finals blowout, since there's always a few. Last year we had quite a number of them, and this year I reckon from now on we'll start seeing not as many close matches in the final series. I reckon there'll be maybe 1 or 2 more, but that's about it, I think. So yeah, I'm going to tip Melbourne by 51 points. The leading goal kicker to be Bailey Fritsch with 5 goals. He hasn't kicked more than 4 goals in a game this season so far, but he has kicked a goal in every single game that he's played, and he hasn't missed a game, and so really he's kicked a goal in every single match he's played. Incredibly consistent. Hasn't really had any games where he's just dominated the play, but I think this is, I reckon he lifts for finals and kicks 5 goals, registering his highest tally for the season. Most disposals, Clayton Oliver 35. I mean, he pretty much racks it up every week. Apart from last week where he only got 29, although even then he was still the highest disposal getter on the ground. Yeah, Clayton Oliver for 35 disposals, and Melbourne to win by 51 points. Yeah, I hope it's a bit closer than this, but I have a feeling this could be a real blowout. Now for the second semi-final matchup, we'll be seeing Collingwood take on the Fremantle Dockers. These two sides have only played each other once this season, and that was in round 10 when Collingwood gave Fremantle a touch-up in the wet by 36 points. It was their first win of 11 wins in a row through that middle to late part of the season, and it was during a bit of a shaky patch of form for Fremantle. They had an absolutely blistering start to the season, but they really stalled with a couple of bad losses in the wet to Gold Coast and Collingwood. So Saturday night is going to be a bit of a wet match, potentially. There is forecast for a bit of rain in Melbourne. Not as much as there was on this day when they last played them, but it still could be enough to put them off their game, as Fremantle aren't a very good wet weather side. Obviously, we've seen that throughout the year, how they've dropped games in the wet and just played not anywhere near as good as they would in dry weather. So how much of a factor that will play into this match, we'll have to wait and see. But it should be an interesting match. I do believe it will be closer than the last time they played at Optus Stadium. There aren't really many interesting statistics relating to this matchup that I could find. The only one I could really think of is that apart from the last time these two clubs played, Fremantle had beaten Collingwood 3 times in a row, but I feel like that's a bit irrelevant, especially seeing that Collingwood did beat them last time, and it's only 3 matches in a row, so there aren't really any major statistics or hoodoos in play here. So yeah, I think I'll just present my tips now for this match. So in this final, I am going to be, as you can see on screen, tipping Fremantle by 16 points. I did tip Fremantle to win this game in my original finals predictions video. I tipped this matchup to be the semi-final, and I thought Collingwood would go out in straight sets. Collingwood played a lot better than I thought they would in that first final. It almost made me change my tip, but I decided to stick to what I originally had. I don't think there's going to be a whole lot of rain. It says there is like 2 to 4 millimeters forecast, but that could easily hit at a different part in the day, not during the match. And even if it does hit during the match, it really might not be all that much rain, and it might not really affect the game at all. So I think weather shouldn't be too much of a factor in this game, and that's part of the reason why I'm going to tip Fremantle. I think they'll be inspired after their last win. They might, if they win this, then I think they will get pretty well beaten in the matchup in the preliminary final, but I'm going to tip them to win this, and I'll tip them to win it by 16 points. Leading goal kicker Lachie Schultz, most disposals Andrew Brayshaw. And yeah, that'll be my tips for the semi-finals. So that is all for today's video. I hope you did enjoy. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe. Tell me what your tips are for the semi-finals, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye.